Shalom and welcome to this edition of ILTV's Israel Weekly, one of the most popular shows on cable and internet television. I'm Mitchell Barak, filling in for the regular host, Steve Leibowitz, a pioneer of English language journalism in Israel. Joining me today in the studio are two very experienced, talented, and insightful guests. The first is Dani Ayalon, former Deputy Foreign Minister, member of Knesset, and former Israeli ambassador to the United States. Welcome, Dani.
Thank you, Mitch.
The second is Rabbi Dov Lipman, a former member of Knesset, an American immigrant to Israel, and author of his fourth book, To Unify a Nation, which explores the important issue of separation of religion and state in Israel. Welcome, Dov.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Before we get started, I wanted to correct something from last week's discussion. We discussed in depth the video exchanges between Prime Minister Netanyahu and his comments to the Israeli Arab community. While the discussion was sometimes critical, I neglected to mention that this government, under the leadership of Prime Minister Netanyahu, passed a massive aid and stimulus package of about $4 billion US, which is really unprecedented and deserved to be mentioned in the discussion. So I apologize for that. Last week, during our discussion on U.S.-Israel relations, we briefly touched on the Iran deal that ensures that their nuclear program is peaceful only. Dov, I think you specifically said that the agreement is done. The best we can hope for is enforcement of the agreement at this point. Is that correct?
That's correct, and continuing to be critical, but perhaps more quiet. But yes, it's done.
Okay. So this week, we'll pick it up. President Obama said, and let's look at the videotape of what he said about that agreement.
You'll recall that there were all these horror stories about how Iran was going to cheat and this wasn't going to work, and Iran was going to get $150 billion to finance terrorism and all these kinds of scenarios. And none of them have come to pass. And it's not just the assessment of our intelligence community. It's the assessment of the Israeli military and intelligence community, the country that was most opposed to this deal, that acknowledges this has been a game changer and that Iran has abided by the deal and that they no longer have the sort of short-term breakout capacity that would allow them to develop nuclear weapons.
So, the Israeli Defense Ministry, or the Defense Minister himself, Avigdor Lieberman, we're not sure which, released a statement refuting the president's claim in a very direct and harsh manner. The statement of the Defense Ministry said, quote, "The Israeli defense establishment believes that agreements have value only if they are based on the existing reality, but they have no value if the facts on the ground are the complete opposite of those the deal is based upon. The Munich Agreement didn't prevent the Second World War and the Holocaust precisely because its basis, according to which Nazi Germany could be a partner for some sort of agreement, was flawed, and because the leaders of the world then ignored the explicit statements of Hitler and the rest of Nazi Germany's leaders." Now, it only took a few hours. The Prime Minister called the U.S. ambassador to apologize, and then the Israeli Defense Ministry retracted the statement. Haaretz even called it the first time in his political career that Avigdor Lieberman actually said the words, or close to it, "I'm sorry." Overly harsh? On target? What does it say about the U.S.-Israeli relationship, the relationship between the Prime Minister and the Defense Minister? Let's start with you, Dani.
Well, I don't think it will have any ripple effect on the U.S.-Israeli relationship, which are strong and solid, irrespective of who sits in the White House, in the DOD or MOD here or whatever. But certainly, I think most of the damage was done to Lieberman, and he should have known better. He has been stung before when he was Minister of Foreign Affairs, when he was almost denied any access to Washington. Hillary Clinton, when she was Secretary of State, would not speak to him, and others. He should have known better. And now he's in the big league, and he really not only misspoke, but he did it I would say in a cowardly way, because that was his statement, but he didn't say it, and he didn't stood behind it. He let the Ministry of Defense take all the heat. And this is really wrong because this is where Israel's national security is very much involved. So I'm glad that he took his words back. I'm glad that he apologized. And again, he proved that for him, a word is really a word, never retracting.
Okay, now, Dov, you've worked with members of Congress, you've been on delegations to Washington. How does something like this affect the relationship, and how is it perceived?
So I'm actually very happy with the way that quote was put out, the exact wording. I mentioned before, criticism quietly, we continue to express that. But something which is said in such an exaggerated form, no intelligent person who understands history can make a comparison between the two situations. No one can say that. That's not a legitimate criticism. This is not Munich in 1938. We're about to get a $4 billion a year package from the United States to help us in our strength. Israel in no way can be compared to Czechoslovakia in terms of its weakness. We're a strong, good, powerful country. So the comparison right away is so exaggerated that I don't think anyone will take this seriously. Meaning, had a defense official stood up and said, we want you to know in the United States, here are our issues with the deal, that could cause some problems in the current situation and climate. But it was so exaggerated in the way that it was said, I don't think there will be any major damage. And if it does, there might be some questions behind closed doors, and we'll reaffirm that everything's fine.
Just to be a little bit fair to Lieberman, and having said that, it was the president's, he started. The president misspoke. I think he shouldn't have bragged about this agreement. We're only 1 year. There are still 9 more years to go. And secondly, it's not his place to speak for the Israeli defense or intelligence community. However, the response was way out of order, and I'm glad this issue is resolved. I'm glad that the Prime Minister really acted as the responsible adult, and he really extinguished the fire. He caught it right away, understanding the damage, and he extinguished it right away.
The one language, and I want to build off what Ambassador Yalon said, the saying that Israel believes it's a game changer, that's just not the reality of what Israel believes. We're watching it and we're making sure that it's being enforced, but no authority in Israel is proclaiming this deal is a game changer. We are still going to be defending ourselves from Iran, still worrying about what's going to happen year by year and when it reaches its decade point, the 15-year point. So we're not saying that. I think that might have pushed people a little bit in the wrong direction here, and that was the terminology that we would take issue to. But again, how you take issue to it is what separates, I think, the children from the adults in terms of being responsible.
Was any of it done to kind of influence the negotiations for the deal that's being negotiated now, do you think?
I hope not, because if this was the purpose, it was just counterproductive. And I believe it was done only for one purpose, and that was for political gains, narrow political gains of the Minister of Defense. It was for local consumption here, but again, you cannot mix really most vital national and security interest with political needs, and I hope he learned his lesson.
Is there an effect, now, talking to his base, the base of Lieberman's party, how do they view this statement, would you think?
Well, I'm sure that some of them were very happy. Here he's speaking, with Jewish pride and all that. But I think after the effect and after the cooling water from Washington, I believe they almost realized that it was a mistake. If you noticed, the other senior politicians who really fight for the same base, be it Netanyahu, who acted immediately against it, or even Bennett, did not make a sound about it. They let Lieberman to stay and high and dry, and I'm not sure it helped him politically, not at all, because he showed again a lack of judgment, lack of responsibility, and again, as a Minister of Defense, where Israel's security, Israeli lives are dependent on what he does and what he says, I think that was really a big, big fiasco, and hopefully he will learn from it.
And politically, to gain from it, it would have to be Victor Lieberman in front of the camera in his style, expressing it, and not some kind of a quote put out that way. I think that to connect the dots all the way to him for the people who are busy working every day and getting little headlines here and there, I don't see any kind of political gain from the way this was carried out.
But again, I think also he was carried away because he is trying to really show that he is not Bogi Ya'alon. That his policies are different, that he's going to destroy Hamas, he is going to change the entire landscape of the Middle East. We see some more demolitions of terrorist homes. So I guess he was kind of carried away thinking that he can really show himself as something who is not Bogi Ya'alon, but more proactive.
Does this have any effect on the general Israeli public? We like to talk about the political base, meaning, so you're an average, parent from Tel Aviv, where this studio is, or from Herzliya, or from Jerusalem, or from anywhere else. Does this give you more confidence or less confidence in the defense minister and sending your kid that this is the person who's going to decide about military operations, war possibly, defending the state of Israel?
When Lieberman got the appointment, right away people talked about the catastrophe that's awaiting us. And then he started off doing pretty well, being dignified and saying the right things and sort of not being in any way extreme. I think this brought back some of those fears to the point of, wait a minute, we thought he was heading the right way. Perhaps that old Lieberman that we were afraid of is coming back. And I think that's something which people are going to pay attention to. Will he bring it back to who he's been the last few months, or will we see a regression to the dangerous Lieberman that people were afraid of?
Okay. Now, Donnie, having been the ambassador in Washington, you probably got called in a number of times, whether it was to the White House, the National Security Council, the Pentagon, to kind of explain some of the internal politics here. How do you explain these things? Are there any examples that stick out in your mind?
Well, there were a few, I would say, a few things I had to explain, and always what worked for me best was the political system in Israel. So I would say, listen, this minister or that minister did not speak for the government, only the prime minister. By the way, there was a lot of respect to Ariel Sharon in Washington, White House and everywhere else. So he said, he doesn't speak for the prime minister. You have to understand, this is our system. And they did understand that. But this time, when this statement came, and Dov said, it wasn't directly related to him, although everybody knows that it's him. But for him to really go behind the ministry and put the entire ministry on the line, I think this got Washington very upset. And as I said, I'm not sure that he will be very well received the next time he goes there.
Okay. Anything else?
Just the point about the system, this is something which we explain over and over and over again, even on a parliament level. We sit with members of parliament, members of Congress especially. It's not each individual on their own. It's the parliamentary system. It's coalition building. And it's something which we have to repeat over and over again, just so they can understand exactly what Donnie said, that this is not the government of Israel speaking, but we do find ourselves doing damage control, and very often it's on a very educational level, just reminding them about what we're dealing with internally over here.
And Mitch, you know it, in the United States, all the secretaries work for the president, correct, and they serve at his pleasure. It's not the case here. Prime Minister cannot fire them because then he fires himself. So they do understand that in Washington.
Okay. Next story. Turning now to what I would like to call the political Olympics in Rio. Really, it's just the Olympics, but somehow the Middle East conflict always gets the gold medal, and it's happening again. First of all, finally, after all these years, the memory of the 11 Israeli athletes killed at the 1972 Olympics in Munich is getting some official recognition. Too little, too late, some would say, but at least it's a start. Donnie, you said that you had some experience with that issue.
Yes, when I was in the ministry, 2011, I got a call from the widows of the 11, and they complained to me how the International Olympic Committee never took their calls because all they wanted is to really serve the memory in a dignified way of their loved ones. And at that time, we started to work vis-a-vis the committee, the Olympic Committee. We also tried to use some leverage with other governments that would put some pressure. And I'm glad that now they do understand that this is something that they must do. I'm still somewhat disappointed that it was not included within the official ceremony. There was a separate ceremony, but at least it is a start.
Okay. So this Olympic Games in Rio, Israel is being represented by the largest delegations of athletes ever. 47 athletes in 17 sports. We have runners, golfers, judo, tennis, and many more. In addition, it is believed that 10,000 Israeli tourists travel to Rio to cheer on the athletes. While everyone is hopeful that politics in the Middle East conflict would not be part of the Games, it has become an issue already.
I would like to share with you the events that preceded the opening ceremony of the Olympic Games in 2016. The Israeli Olympic delegation was preparing to board the bus for the ceremony, which was found out to be the same bus as the Lebanese delegation. Once the Lebanese team realized that they were sharing the same bus with us, they asked the driver to close the door in order to prevent us from getting onto the bus. This event occurred with the support of the head of the Lebanese delegation. The organizers tried to split us into different buses, which did not make sense in terms of security and representation. I insisted, and we insisted, that we get onto the intended bus, and indeed the driver opened the door, only this time the head of the Lebanese delegation blocked the entrance himself. The organizers tried to prevent the international incident and sent us aside to a special vehicle, but it didn't matter because the incident already happened. How is it possible that they let something like this happen, and on the opening night of the Olympic Games? Isn't this the opposite of what the Olympics represent and work against? I cannot describe the way I feel. I'm enraged and shocked by this event.
So as we heard, the Lebanese delegation of athletes, a total of only 9 athletes, I might add, tried to prevent some of our athletes from boarding a bus to an Olympic event. Besides the chutzpah of this tiny delegation, this is unsportsmanlike conduct that is being tolerated by the International Olympic Committee. Their actions resulted in being scolded by the committee. In addition, a Saudi Arabian judo athlete refused to compete against an Israeli, thereby forfeiting the match. Is this freedom of expression, incitement, and what place should it play at the Olympics? Dov, you're an avid sports fan. I've seen you with a Washington Redskins jersey walking the streets of Jerusalem. So what do you think about politics, Olympics, sports? Where does it fit for you?
So I make 2 comments. First of all, I think it's wonderful that Israel is there. This is part of our being part of the nations of the world, and it's critical that we be there, and I would never say that we should ever take any other stance. As someone who works in public diplomacy and making the case for Israel, we need to be highlighting these situations and pointing out the double standard in the world that our athletes are treated in this fashion. I don't want to cry about it. I don't want to whine about it, but I do want to point it out to the relevant authorities that you have to understand what kind of an environment has been created internationally anti-Israel and the double standard. Again, what issue are they protesting? What is their problem that they have with us that they don't have with Syria or Iran, where who knows the numbers of people that are being slaughtered or being discriminated against? That's the double standard that we have to be pointing out. On an athletic level, I just want to point out that in Israel, there's a lot of excitement about the Olympics. Our team is going, the pictures with the president, the huge delegation. We're going to win a medal. We're going to hear the Hatikva, the national anthem played, and then everyone gets let down. And I always feel our role should be that we're there. Yes, it's great that we compete. We should compete at a high level. But let's remember we're making other incredible contributions to the world, what we're really good at. The technology and medical advances and all these others, the Nobel Prize winners that we have, we've never been known for athleticism, and that's okay. I don't think we have to feel that we'll only find our place in the world if we succeed in the Olympics. I enjoy watching it. I enjoy seeing the Jewish star there, the Magen David. If we ever hear Hatikva, that's wonderful. But let's just sit back and relax and enjoy the fact that 99.9% of the time we're accepted there and we're competing there, and that's just wonderful.
Great. What is your favorite Olympic sport, if I can ask?
So the moment of the 100-meter dash, that build-up of those 9 seconds, where 9 seconds, people are working 4 years for those 9 seconds, the build-up, and then that burst of energy. I don't think there's anything like it.
Okay. Donnie, first of all, let's start. What is your favorite Olympic sport?
Well, I would say it's basketball, but since I have watched Michael Phelps, the one Olympic ago, I guess swimming. And again, the short distances, the 100 meters, the 200 meters is amazing. Butterfly style, this is something
I would say it's typically Israeli. Israelis aren't really marathon runners. We don't want to do any, really long sports that take a long time.
We had the under-21 baseball championships here last week. My son pitched. Someone brought his Israeli boyfriend, an American girl, but after a half of inning, he said, I can't take this anymore. Where's the action? Nothing's happening. So,
and that is the American pastime. So the Americans like a 9-inning game with a lot of statistics.
Correct.
And have just agreed, nothing more than like 15 seconds is what we're at.
That's exciting.
So I personally like archery, I have to say. I mean, just kidding. Okay, let's, so tell me, where do you think sports and diplomacy, have you had any issues like this? Where do you think, what's the Hasbara opportunity for Israel?
Oh, it's huge. And here, again, the participation is equal or even more important than the winning here. And the spirit of the game, the promotion of brotherhood without borders, without any discriminations between gender, race, ethnicity, you name it. So the idea of the Olympic Games and their, bringing them back after 2,000 years, I think 1896 was the first Olympic Games in Athens. The idea was actually to overcome the politics divide and really to try and answer politics with something which is much bigger. And again, unfortunately, we saw that terrorism has been part of the game in Atlanta, 1996, of course in Munich, and what we saw yesterday or on Friday with the Lebanese is really something which is not done. And I think a stronger measure should have been taken by the Olympic Committee to the extent of expelling them from the Games.
If I could mention one other thing that people don't know, behind the scenes, the International Olympic Committee, when they want to work on security for their games, they turn to Israeli security companies to secure the games. A member of Knesset that I worked with in the last Knesset, David Sur, he was in the Atlanta Games. He was the one responsible for, and these games as well. It's an Israeli company that's overseeing the security apparatus. It's just an incredible thing, again, to see what we are contributing, and people recognize if you want to fight terror, turn to Israel to see what we've been dealing with for the last 68 years, and we can learn something to try to secure those games. And I'm proud, I think we're very proud that we're the ones that are providing that security expertise.
That's certainly true when it comes to security, but where's the opportunity? Why isn't Israel able to capitalize on this opportunity? Meaning, you're probably right. If it was, and I saw someone put this on Facebook, was very brilliant, said if it was a white athlete saying that they wouldn't play against someone who's a black athlete, that wouldn't be accepted. So why is this accepted? Why isn't Israel able to capitalize this and to make a stronger stance and to make sure the International Olympic Committee stands up to racism, anti-Semitism, whatever you want to call it?
I would say two reasons. First of all, nobody wants to really tarnish the festivities and the elation of having these games. Secondly, Israel doesn't make a case out of it. And if we do not make a case out of it, nobody else will.
Why don't we make a case out of it?
That's something that we have to really think ourselves. And again, maybe it's part of the many failures in Hasbara, not really putting all our energy and our imagination and our creativity in this field.
If I could just say, I agree that it shouldn't be the Prime Minister standing up and making a case and ruining the dignified manner of the Games and pushing the Olympic Committee into a corner. But if we had a proper Hasbara apparatus, public diplomacy apparatus, there would be one single message going to all the wonderful organizations that are out there, perhaps some quick 30-second video making the case, let it go viral, make that case. We don't have that apparatus. There's no single message going out that everyone is sharing, while the other side, so to speak, is doing that. This is something we've been working on for a few years, trying to somehow streamline this so that we get our messaging down right. We don't have that, and this is a great example of a failure. We could be out there showing the world the spirit of the Olympic Games, and look what's happened. And I do believe we can win over hearts and minds if we do it the right way.
So our first line of defense there from a minister's point of view, if I'm not mistaken, is Miri Regev, Minister of Culture and Sport. And she certainly knows how to express herself. Where is her role in this, and why has she been relatively silent when we normally hear her quite frequently?
That's a good question, Mitch. Certainly, she was the most senior in the delegation. She represents the government of Israel. She is the Minister of Sports. If she is silent, then I think really it was a missed opportunity. Why she didn't do it, I don't know, because as you say, on every little thing here, she can come in front of the television even in a provocative way. I think if there was time to do action and to do what she does here in Israel, this was the time, missed opportunity.
I think she might have used it. I don't want to speak for sure, but I think she did use it for some kind of Facebook posts or messaging back here to score political points. I think that was done. That's a shame. If that is accurate, we should be unifying together and getting that message out. I do actually put it also into the Ministry of Hasbara, of Public Diplomacy, where again there should be messaging going out. The problem is it's dispersed among 5 or 6 different ministers. But if we had it right, there would be a clear person who is in charge, getting the message out. We have, like I said, wonderful organizations that are just waiting for that message, waiting to get out the material. We have the technology to make a great video to get the message out, and unfortunately we're not doing it. Hopefully we'll learn the lesson and we'll get our act in order and start doing it right.
And in defense of the Olympic Committee, I can say they went pretty lightly on the Russian athletes who they found were doping. So, if they're not going to disqualify people for taking steroids and other drugs, the likelihood of them being a really disciplinary body is quite slim.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, that's all the time we have for today. I want to thank our guests. For more on this, please log on to iltv.tv. I again want to thank our panelists, former Knesset members Dani Ayalon and Dov Lipman. I'm Mitchell Barak. Thanks for joining us on ILTV's Israel Weekly.